If you make people work over here to get these programs, what's going to happen to childcare? It'll be $40 billion in 5 years. Right? The only way to do this is to get our arms around the whole thing, to calibrate it to the poverty level, and to actually either, cancel it at the federal level and give the money, either just cancel it entirely, do block grants to the states and let them figure it out, or to reform it in a dramatic way that gives money to people and asks for something in return. It could be as simple as even just graduating it to income so that people are truly motivated to get off the system. If you're just going to pay them to live a comfortable life for a long time, then that's what's going to happen. So we've got to do some major reform, and the only way to do that is to get our arms around the whole thing. And I'm going to jump to the back page because that's really what I would like some help on. Why am I here today is just because I've tried to find people saying this, and I haven't found them yet. And as soon as you show me some organizations that are working on this, I'm going to go back to Colorado and just be a happy camper. But I'm telling you, it seems to me that this is really a lot easier than we're all making it. And I think that many on the left are hiding this because they don't really want this to be known by Americans. And I'm not sure it's even those on the left. I mean, I don't really understand why Washington does what Washington does. But what I do know is that most people in America, if you go to them and say, all right, if you're a football fan, what would happen if I allowed holding on the offensive line? People would say, well, you get a lot more passing yards, aren't you? But when we say we want to do something in welfare, most people don't understand this because they just haven't been told it. And so their answer is, oh my gosh, did you hear what happened when Nancy Pelosi got into it with, I think it was Representative Ryan, who said maybe we should get rid of the Head Start program. And he said maybe we should get rid of WIC. And Nancy Pelosi said, oh my God, you guys don't want poor children to have milk. Well, that's you don't win that argument. None of us are saying we don't want children to have milk, for heaven's sakes. We all believe in that. Well, what we need to do is to say, we want to get our arms around all of this. We want to make a system that actually would help the poor. Because if you gave the poor one check instead of 12, got rid of all the bells and whistles, and then asked for some performance in return, there'd be many social workers and poor people who would support that, because this system doesn't work for them either. They don't like it. And I've talked to social workers, and I've talked to others. This is one of the few places in the federal budget that there's not a lot of pain in cutting costs. Now, I mean, that's not true with federal workers. We'd lose a lot of them. Washington would be dramatically affected. Yes. But the poor people would, the poorest of the poor would not be. Who would be are that second range of, I'll call it the middle class. People who are making money above poverty. Somewhere in there is where we got to cut things. Now remember on our successful last congressional super committee work, went really well, didn't it? They were looking to cut $1.2 trillion over 10 years. Okay? Well, here's $358 billion versus $165 billion. Even if you handed out cash to all poor people, you would say, what is that, $180 billion. So there's your $120 billion a year, easy. Easy. And not many people know that because we're just always arguing about a single program. And what I would love to help those in Washington that are trying is to say, we can spend a lot of ammunition, one program at a time, arguing over 5-year-olds should get milk, no 6-year-olds should get milk. Arguing over school lunches, no school breakfast, no after-school food. What we need to argue, I believe, is to say we want to get our arms around the whole system, and we want to calibrate it to income levels. If we're going to pay out cash, pay out cash. We're paying out cash anyway. Food stamps is cash, SSI is cash, EITC is cash. We're paying the cash. It may be socialism, it may not be constitutional, it may have a lot of problems with it, but the fact of the matter is, it's going on today in a big way, and it's been going on for years and years and years. How do we start to fix it? I think if Americans understand the rules on an offensive line, they will understand this crystal clear. If we say that it's inconsistent in qualification standards, shouldn't it be consistent? Who would raise their hand and say no? You know? And when you say that we should have one agency doing this to save money, those are hard things to argue about. When you argue about the past motivations of why it was created, I think those oftentimes are fighting over. When you argue fraud, and there is an intense amount of fraud, because you got 12 programs, all with different rules. Well, I've argued fraud a lot in my life and said, you know, this is just crazy. Well, it is, and the answer is just fix the fraud. That's not the problem. The problem is the structure, the rules. And it makes a ton of sense to people when they see it. What did we talk? We go in 20 minutes, maybe a little more than that, half an hour. And you get it now, right? It's not hard. You just do the top level, and you say it's 12 programs. Look at all the stuff. Usually, you end it right there, and people are going, "Why did we do that again? Why do we have lunches? And why do we, you know?" It doesn't make sense to people. And so that would be my charge. And on the back of this brochure, it says, "Let's help Washington adopt meaningful change." Like all problems, the first one is to admit you have a problem. I think we have a problem. Step 2 is to address the whole system, and we talked about that. Because when you do that, you get your arms all the way around it, and then logical things happen. You say, who should get the money? It's hard to argue that a family that makes 20,000 should get 15 more. You know? It's hard to argue to the American people that a family that makes 35,000 and worked hard to get it should come out worse than the family who made 20,000 and is on welfare. I'll take those arguments. We win those. You know, that's a hard thing to argue. And those only get asked when we're looking at the whole system. When we're bifurcated and looking at single programs, all we can do is to say, well, I guess that family shouldn't have their 5-year-old get milk. And those are hard decisions. The third thing is to define meaningful change. If we address the whole system, we want to define meaningful change. I used to recommend, get rid of it. Then I'd recommend block grants to the states. Then I'd recommend, no, we'll just reform it into a single program. I don't do that anymore because I think that that's a step too far today. I think that I go to a lot of different groups, and some groups just, it's unconstitutional, it should be done. Other groups are, it's there, it's 50 years, you'll never win those arguments, you know. And so I just backed off and said, look, as soon as the American people address the whole system and ask themselves what makes sense, I think then something will make sense here, and we'll save a lot of money, and we'll do something that makes sense. And of course, the step 4 is that you have to adopt meaningful change when an act of Congress signed by a president. So I don't think we're ready for that quite yet, but yeah. And so, yeah. So why am I here and not in Washington? Is because Washington isn't going to change itself. Not like this. Not like this. And I believe that we need to get a little bit of a grassroots effort going. I don't know how much of a grassroots effort it takes to change the debate. It doesn't take, you know, a 50% majority to raise these issues and say, shouldn't we get our arms around the whole thing? Because I can tell you, if that were asked that way, and we had a little bit of education so that people knew there were 12 programs operated by 7 agencies, all with different, you know, I think that question would then get into the national conscious, and we would arm our people that are working on these things back in Washington who are trying to make the nation better. I think it would help them a great deal.